shall begin now.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. So, today we are in the company of a great Haaretz columnist, and he is called a dissident writer and a dissident columnist, but I consider him to be on the true side of the history, and most of the people consider him to be on the true side of the history. So, we are going to have a conversation with him. First of all, I would like to introduce Gideon Levy to everyone in our audience. So Gideon Levy lives in Tel Aviv. He works for Haaretz as a senior columnist over there. And he has been doing research on, he has been covering, I should say, the Palestinian occupation for the past 35 years. And he has written 2 books, one recently published, Killing on Gaza. So I would like to continue the conversation on Gaza conflict right now. And I would really like to welcome Levi on board. And thank you so much, Levi, for giving so much of your time to the Philosophy Room. It's really an honor to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
So Gideon, I would like to begin with the first question because I was listening to your last podcast that you gave actually to current affairs, and right at the end he asked a question to which you responded that I would like to have an hour to talk about it. So I would like to give you some time and give you because this is something that happened recently, and then we are going to go to the main topics that we discussed during the email that we shared on the email. And the first thing is about it. The question is about the U.S. foreign policy. So recently, as you might have seen, that Blinken came to Israel. I don't know how many trips he had done to Israel and to the region this time round. What do you assess? What do you take from this attitude of that the posture that the U.S. poses towards the Middle East right now? Because it seems like they want the ceasefire because that's the posture that they say that they want. But at the same time, there is this $20 billion money coming in for some purpose, God knows what. And then there is this kind of blame being put on Hamas leaders that they are not accepting the deal. But I would really like you to focus on what is the bone of contention between the US and Israel, because we do not so much talk about what is actually that they disagree upon. So can you please shed some light on these recent visits that Blinken has done, and what's your assessment of these visits?
It's a great mystery. That's the truth. I'm not sure that you can explain everything in rational tools because it seems like the American interest is to prevent a regional war, to stop the war in Gaza, to rebuild Gaza and rehabilitate Gaza. And it's almost obvious that this should be the American interest. But the United States is acting exactly the opposite way. It's an unbelievable gap between the rhetoric of the president, very impressive, about peace and humanitarian aid and rebuilding and everything, and the diplomacy which gives Israel a carte blanche, a full free hand to continue to kill, to continue to destruct, supply Israel with an unprecedented quantity of weapons and ammunition without putting any conditions, nothing. So one should decide, do we judge the United States according of its rhetoric or according of its actions? I think by the end of the day, what really matters are the actions, and the actions mean that the United States support continuing the war, that the United States is responsible and is a partner in this criminal war in Gaza.
Thank you so much for expanding upon that, because I want to add a follow-up question to that, if you would allow me. And it's this: that is there a possibility, because you must be looking at this closely, is this a possibility that the US somehow wants to drag this so that Iran gets involved in it? Or is it just Netanyahu who, just like in that ridiculous speech at the Congress, wanted to pose that, now we are going to go after Iran? So is that what the intention seems like? Because what's the reason? Neither do you, neither do the world, I think, understand. That what's the exact reason why the US cannot actually put an end to this? Because this, it has to do something with US and Israel, between these two.
I think the answer, as I said before, I don't have a full answer, and it's a great mystery for me. But the answer lies in the very irrational relations between the United States and Israel, and not only about Iran. I don't think that the United States is interested in a war with Iran now. I think Netanyahu might be, sure. He's trying to pull the United States into a war with Iran. But I cannot see the Americans in an election year wanting to get to war with Iran. I mean, looks so far-fetched. The key is those so-called special relations with Israel, in which you never know who is the superpower between the two, who is dictating whom, who is depending on. And unfortunately, I don't have a full answer, because rationally, as I said before, logically, it doesn't make any sense the way that the United States is acting. You have to add to this also that the public opinion in the United States is changing. And there's more and more criticism in the United States over its foreign policy toward Israel. So maybe it is something behind or beyond logic. But in any case, the outcome is a very, very weird outcome, in which Israel has the full freedom to do whatever it wants.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because everybody is confused about what is going to happen, what is happening in the US or from the US front. Now, I would like to turn to the actual discussion that I requested you to have, and that is about the Israeli domestic politics before and after 7th of October. Because there is a lot of attention now being paid to the other side of the fence, i.e., Gaza, what happened over there, and then how Israelis knew what would happen, and all of these kind of things. But I remember clearly that before 7th, like if you go to September 2023, we knew that there were protests on the street, widespread protests on the streets of Israel. There was something going on regarding the Supreme Court. The reservists and the Air Force were, I think, on strike, or they were not on the same page as the government wanted them to be. So can you kindly paint the picture what exactly was happening before the 7th of October, and then suddenly, or after the 7th of October, there seems to be a change within the Israeli domestic politics?
I think that what happened in Israel before the 7th of October has quite little to do with what happened on the 7th and after. There was a protest in Israel, but this protest was limited to very clear borderlines, namely to try to stop this legal reform or revolution and to get rid of Netanyahu. It had nothing to do with ending the occupation, for example, ending the apartheid. It didn't have anything to do with human rights, with morality, with questions like this. And even the army or the reservists who participate in it, it was very clear that the moment there will be a real danger, none of them will refuse to serve. The 7th of October came because of Israel's arrogance, because Israel believed that it is totally protected, because it still thinks that it can live on its sword forever. And it's enough to have a strong army, which finally is also not strong, and you don't need to do anything else, that you can live by force, live on your sword forever. And this arrogance should have come to its end on the 7th of October, because Hamas taught us that there are limits to military power, and that few hundred fighters riding motorcycles can beat a regional superpower which possesses any weapon in the world. And this arrogance led us to this indifference and not taking seriously the rival. And the rival saw it and saw the weakness and took advantage of it and did what he did on the 7th of October.
Okay. So yeah, there is no connection between the two. But what I wanted to emphasize upon is what is now does Israeli society seem more cohesive after the 7th of October rather than before the 7th of October is what I was trying to get at. Is there a change within the mood of the Israeli society? Do you see any difference, because you obviously live there? So what's the difference before and after, or is it the same?
There is a difference, and not for the good.
Okay.
Almost all Israelis believe after the 7th of October that Israel can do whatever it wants after the atrocities of the 7th of October. There are no moral or legal boundaries. We can do everything. There are no limits of international law, of moral consideration, nothing. More than this, even those part of the Israeli society which had some empathy to the Palestinians, to their struggle, who had some guilt feelings toward the way that we are handling them, governing them, even those parts of the society lost it. And you see now much more of a militaristic, nationalistic, racist society, in which expressing empathy with the Palestinian sufferer is almost a crime in Israel, and for sure not legitimate, in which the Palestinians doesn't interest anyone in Israel, and their suffer doesn't interest anyone in Israel because of the 7th of October. That's a very, very negative change.
Okay, that seems bleak too, because I remember once you said this when you narrated this incident. I heard this, that you were sitting in a cafe and you somehow said that you questioned Israeli actions in Gaza, and someone came to your ear, and I think it was the waitress or the waiter who said that you're a traitor.
Yeah.
So this is what I wanted to also ask you this, because others like Pape also said this thing, that there seems to be a very deep divide within the Israeli society between two groups, one who want a theocratic apartheid state and the other who want a kind of secular liberal apartheid state.
Yeah.
But my question to you is that is it possible to find someone in Israel who does not want an apartheid state?
Less than before the 7th of October. And before the 7th of October, they were very small in figures as well. But now, much less. Israel is now basically speaking in one voice, and this is a voice of revenge, of anger over the Palestinians, of hatred over the Palestinians, of losing any humanity because what happened on the 7th. And right now, to expect change from within the Israeli society or hope from within the Israeli society is so far-fetched, out of the question.
Okay, so that means that now the even those people who were secular, who wanted like a liberal Israel, they are not so much in line with the I mean, they have become more in line with the theocratic party, you can say, the theocratic side, you can say, that kind of thing. So now, okay, the thing that bothers the world in general, and that bothers obviously, I think you also personally, is something that is close to you, which is the legal system. And I wanted to expand I wanted to ask something about the legal system, which is that in the occupied territory, which is basically the whole of Israel plus Palestine, so in the whole Israeli territory, let's say, there seems to be two legal systems. One is the Israeli domestic law for Israeli citizens, and then the second is the Israeli military rule for the Palestinians. So, is this correct, first of all? Am I saying it correctly?
Cannot be more corrected. And that's the main characteristic of an apartheid state, obviously.
Because if that's correct, then it becomes problematic, and it is highlighted every time when Israel comes on in the news, that there seems to be a discord between the international humanitarian law and the Israeli domestic law. What I would like you to expand upon is kindly, how is it possible that an Israeli state, or any state, even there were other apartheid states like South Africa, but specifically in the case of Israel, what do you think, that how has the legal system evolved such that it has actually promoted this? That there are two systems within a system. There are two rules within a rule. What is your assessment, and how can you give us like a romp through of evolution of the legal system, Israeli legal system? How was it made possible?
Look, the legal system at this very day, the legal system in Israel enjoys quite high prestige all over the world. And it is a good and fair legal system, except of one marginal subject, and that's the occupation. The Israeli legal system is the biggest collaborator with the occupation. The legal system normalized and legitimized crimes of war, violation of the international law on a daily basis. And the collaboration of the legal system enables Israel and Israelis to think that they are living in a democracy while half an hour away from their homes, there's one of the most brutal tyrannies in the world run by their own government. So the legal system enables Israelis to go with the occupation and the brutality and the apartheid and to feel without it.
Okay, so because I was actually reading one of your speeches that you gave at Chatham House, and it's ironic that the date 7th October 2014 is when
Really?
you actually went there. So I actually have your transcript, the speech that you gave there, and you were asked almost 10 questions over there, and I want to actually quote something from this, so that because it relates to the next question that I want to ask you, and which is this, because it relates to the two legal systems that we talked about currently. This is what you're saying, quote, "One state, two state, this is an issue for another lecture and time is running out." So I will just say, really in a very superficial way, all my life I supported a two-state solution. I think this train left already the station. I don't see any Israeli politician evacuating over 500,000 settlers from their places. Without evacuating over 500,000 settlers, there is no two-state solution. You have said this repeatedly over and over again that you don't see any bright future in the near future. So in this two-state solution, this quotation that I said, how is it possible that when we have this kind of legal system, do you think that legal system as such in itself is a thorn in the bush, is a thorn in the flesh, I should say, regarding this the resolution of the conflict?
As I said, I think this legal system enables Israel to remain part of the liberal world, of the free world, of the West, to remain the darling of the West, the darling of the EU, the darling of the United States, the darling of the liberal free world. But that's a masquerade, that's a costume. Because this legal system, as I say, is covering up. It's covering up a very criminal regime in the occupied territories. Now, as long as the occupied territories, the perception was that the occupation is temporary, this can be acceptable. There are military occupations all over the world, but the condition is that they should be temporary. Israel showed no signs that it means to change the situation of the occupation. Never did. And that's a new story. Then we face an apartheid state. And as long as the legal system covers it up, it's easier for Israel. But now we have a new player, a new actor, namely the international legal system, which is getting very massively into the picture. And I hope, and I cross my fingers, that they will be courageous enough to call the bluff. Israel will try to say, no, no, we are dealing with it in our own legal system. That's a bluff. And it's the duty, not the right, the duty of the international legal system to get into the picture now in actions, with devotions. It's their duty because the Palestinians cannot take it anymore, because the international community has to intervene, and the international legal system is the best tool.
So, on that, the international legal system has done what it could do. Recently speaking, that they have given potential, they have charged Israel with potential genocide, but nothing has happened even after that ruling. So there is no enforcement of the international law as such, is what I'm trying to get at. Do you see that this lack of enforcement will come into play once Gaza ceasefire deal is done?
I hope, but it seems that the international legal system is very cautious and very slow. No reason for it to be so slow, because it's about life and death. The international legal system, like the international community, every day that passes and the mass killing in Gaza continues, that's the responsibility of the international community to put an end to it, and the legal international system. But it seems that everyone takes its time, and right now, Israel can continue without any limits. And there will be no ceasefire because Israel does not want a ceasefire.
So, which means that we are going to continue seeing this as far as this, as soon as ceasefire deal is, which will not be as soon as possible. And this brings me to your own profession also, journalism, because I wanted to talk about that in line with these issues that we have raised. which is that how is it to be to be like people usually say a dissident journalist in Haaretz, which is the leading newspaper in Israel? Because I find it really interesting to know that because usually whoever says something against Israel, you're automatically ostracized. What has your experience been within Haaretz? Because it seems like Haaretz seems to be a liberal newspaper kind of thing. So I wanted to please ask you, request you to expand upon journalism within Israel, especially journalism of the kind that you do.
So first of all, Haaretz is an island and a lighthouse on an island. And unfortunately, it is maybe the most important Israeli newspaper, but it's for sure not the most read one or the spread one. And all the rest are taking a totally opposite position, namely serving the Israeli narrative, serving the Israeli propaganda, inciting against the Palestinians, dehumanizing them on a daily basis. My great luck is that I'm Jewish, and Jews are privileged in Israel. Zionism is about Jewish supremacy, and Israel is about Jewish supremacy. And being a Jew gives me privileges, including having much more freedom of speech than if I would have been Palestinian or anything else. So for the time being, I still gain total freedom, very little pressures, for sure not from my newspaper, for sure not from the government. I'm totally free. It's not always very pleasant at the streets of Tel Aviv, but I can handle it. And I am privileged enough to continue to speak out freely in Israel. And this must be mentioned because I don't take it for granted. It might stop.
No, because you said in even 10 years ago that there is nothing else that you would do except for speak for the Palestinian rights. And even today, you stand for that, which I mean, it's so much respectful. I mean, you have earned so much respect from, especially from all the international community who have followed your work, and which is quite recommended. I mean, it's quite commendable, and it's quite courageous, to be very frank with you. Now, which also, but this highlights one important thing, which I have noted it down, but I was a bit hesitant to ask you, but I would ask you now. You brought it up, and which is that the importance of theological foundations of Israeli society and generally speaking in the Israeli legal system, for example, specifically speaking. Do you find it theologically motivated to have all of these privileges, or is it like it's basically a Zionist or a political foundation that promotes it? Do you see the difference between theology or politics within the foundation of Israeli institutions?
Yes, I think it's nationalistic, not theological. Because the big question is obviously, and you might be familiar to it, is Judaism just a religion or is it a nationality? We are talking about the Jewish people. You don't talk about the Christian people or the Buddhist people, you talk about the Jewish people. And I think still, even though Israel is turning more and more to the fundamentalistic, theological, religious pole, but still my privileges as a Jew, I'm totally secular, totally secular. My privileges are on a nationalistic basis and not religious basis. It might change. It is changing. But right now it's about really nationalistic privileges.
Okay. No, thank you for explaining that thing. Because it has been disturbing. It's again, because I myself live in Pakistan, which is a state based on religion. So I understand this theological foundation of a state. And so it creates problems for secular people, obviously it does. Now, I would really ask you another question which you have talked about recently, which is the role of the Israeli education system, which also includes, by the way, the media, which also includes the other institutions like the army and also the legal system. So I wanted to ask you about, has there been any change in Palestinian representation in the Israeli education system? Has it somehow, because given your description of Israel as an apartheid state, which has fortified its position as an apartheid state, there seems to be some underlying educational changes coming about, which is changing the perspective and the psyche of the Israeli society. Do you see that's the picture unfolding in front of you? Or am I saying anything wrong over there?
No, you don't say anything wrong. And all those systems that you mentioned are recruiting themselves voluntarily, not by the state. They do it voluntarily, mainly the media, which is the most influential agency. They're recruiting themselves because of commercial reasons, because of this desire to please the readers and the viewers and not to bother them, not to be controversial, not to raise questions that are hard to be answered, and to entertain the people. So the media recruited itself to be a media in the service of the propaganda, of the narrative, the Zionist narrative, which is a propaganda narrative. And history will judge the Israeli media, which is a free media, will judge it very seriously because their role is unbelievable. Same for the education system. But I think the main actor is the media. And the media is an inciting media, a dehumanizing media, a media which covers up all the crimes that Israel is committing. It's a media that has only one goal, namely to please, to content, to amuse the consumers. Nothing but this. And that's very dangerous in a regime which has the potential of being a democracy.
So, which means that, because a follow up question on that, if you say that it is to amuse the Israeli society, then it means that the amusement comes from the dehumanization of Palestinians. Am I right on that?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
which means that, okay, then the three part, the institution, the education system, and the media, the three are playing the same role, which is to dehumanize Palestinians.
Right. In order not to raise all kinds of questions of human rights, of morality, because if they are not human beings like us, if they are born to kill as they are presented here, then there are no questions of morality, of humanity, of human rights.
Because this is, again, you see, we go back again and again to human rights, and you have been doing this for 35 years. You have been on this mission for 35 years, or somehow trying to get human rights for the Palestinians. Your struggle, and I was reading Raja Shahadeh's novels also, and in him, he was also a lawyer. He's also a lawyer, in fact, he's still alive. But this struggle for Palestinian rights seems to have run out of, I don't know, blood, because of the disappointments that it has met in the international arena and within the Israeli justice system. What do you think that now the struggle has become harder and harder and harder, given your courage? Do you see any trajectory of the coming generation to have some kind of acceptance of the Palestinians within Israel?
I'm very sorry to sound so pessimistic, but it all goes to the opposite direction. The younger generation in Israel is much more racist and nationalistic than the old one. The younger generation never met a Palestinian and has no interest in their fate. And we are getting much. I mean, if those young people will turn to become the politicians, the leaders, the journalists of Israel in 10, 20 years, things will be much worse than now. The change is only to the worse, not to the better. And the 7th of October added a lot to this, a lot.
So the way you have described 7th of October up until now is that it has become a catalyst to an already existent potential sentiment, and somehow it has now been enlarged into an Israeli society. And
Absolutely.
and now it has become even more difficult for so which means that Netanyahu must be very famous in Israel.
Actually, he's very famous. He used to be not very popular, but he's regaining popularity. And I don't know if there would be elections today. I'm not sure he will not be re-elected. It is still to be proved. There is a big camp which fights against him, yes, but there is another camp who will go blindly after him and is now, after the 7th of October, sticks to him even more without any rational reason. Because no doubt that Israel's position or situation after the 7th of October is 1,000 times worse than before the 7th of October in any criteria. Israel is in a much worse condition. It's a pariah state. The economy is going very badly. Security is very badly. Tens of thousands of Israelis are evacuated from their homes and can't get back to their homes. I mean, in any parameter, we are in a much worse position than before. And Netanyahu is just continuing to raise in the ports. But that's almost a psychological question, even not a political one.
So what about the new, because you say that now it is in much worse condition internationally speaking. If you look at the global diplomatic stage, in which Russia and China are now getting more involved in Palestine, directly involved in Palestine, whereas Israel is now siding with the US, it seems like the Middle East is becoming the theater of the war that everyone was waiting for or is waiting for, which is Russia and China against the US. Do you see this kind of narrative developing amongst the Israeli journalists or the society that were there?
No, the Israeli journalists don't deal with those questions. They deal only with the Israeli agony and suffer and brave soldiers and hostages. And the Israeli media as a whole hardly deals with strategic questions, with questions of what will be here in 5 years, in 3 years, in 10 years. The media is totally now in the 7th of October. The Israeli media is still stuck in the 7th of October. Day and night they deal with the 7th of October and are incapable of lifting their head and looking forward.
So, what is your assessment then? Okay, if everyone is blind to it, what do you think? Is it going in that direction where the US is now confronted with, in Israel, like a proxy war between the US, China, and Russia? Do you see the potential of this going in that direction or not?
Yes, first of all, there is a potential for a regional war. And after it, it can turn into a global tension and maybe even a world war, sure. It's renewing the days of the Cold War in a different phase, sure.
Okay, so I would ask you one question about your own personal life, so that we also get to know how you became what you became, if you would allow me to do that,
Sure.
because I would like to know how was it possible for you to get out of this propaganda machine that works in the education system, in the media, also in all the other institutions, but you somehow became an exception to all of this. How did you make it possible? Was it from within? Was it from without? What was the motivation for your positions that you take within your articles, in your talks, and within Israel?
I think it's more simple than it seems. I did something that no Israeli journalist or very few Israeli journalists did. I started to travel to the occupied territories on a regular basis. I started to meet Palestinians on a regular basis. I started to talk to them as equal human beings. I started to listen to them like no Israeli listens to them. And gradually, it was not on one day, gradually, I realized what an evil state is Israel when you see the victims. And this I'm doing now regularly, as you say, for 35 years, over 75 years. And it is really a case in which what I saw, what I witnessed, shaped my political views, not the opposite way. My political view is based on decades of following the Israeli crimes. And my moral judgment is based on what I saw, not on what I was told or what I was taught, but what I saw in my own eyes and heard in my own ears. And this, over so many years, is a horrible reality. And I have to recruit myself, or I found myself that I have to recruit myself at least to reflect it, at least to inform those Israelis who have still any interest in it, to inform them this is being done on our behalf.
Thank you so much for that, Gideon. And I would really like the last question to be an open floor for you, but as a message, I would really like you to give a message, something of the kind to the people who have their heart hardened right now, as to how can they somehow, if not completely convert to the other side, which is the Palestinian side, then at least have some some tinges or some moment of self reflection. Okay, let's think.
There are two things I want to say in this framework. The key word or the key value is equality. Not peace, not justice, equality. The moment that Israelis will perceive the Palestinians as equal human beings, which they don't, none of them, will be the moment of the beginning of a solution. But there are so many agencies who prevent it from happening. On the contrary, they are working to show us all the time how moral we are, how much we love our children, how much we follow moral and legal values, and what barbaric people are the Palestinians. You could hear it in Netanyahu's speech in the Congress, which you mentioned in our conversation. We, Israel, are fighting barbarism. Can you believe it? A head of a state which killed 40,000 people, 10,000 children within few months, has the guts to speak about barbarism of the other side. Unbelievable. And the world accepts. So the key is equality between the river and the sea. As about the international community, I'm so convinced that solution will not come from here. Israel will not change by itself. There is no hope for change from within Israel. It is really all about the international community. And what the international community knew to do so well was the first apartheid state, namely South Africa, should be applied toward the second apartheid state, namely Israel. The same means, the same actions, not the rhetoric, actions. The world knew very well how to punish apartheid state when it was South Africa. Why doesn't he do it about Israel?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gideon, for that. And I really appreciate that you said it quite openly and clearly. I would really like to thank you, Gideon, because I wanted to read much more from your speech, but it would take so much time because it's a wonderful speech that you gave at Chatham House, but it would take so much time. But thank you so much, Gideon, and it was really an honor and a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully one day, if God allows us, we meet again.
I hope so. Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you so much,
Bye-bye.
Gideon. Bye.